The week that was supposed to be my wedding week began with an eerie kind of silence. Instead of final fittings, family dinners, and last-minute excitement, I found myself staring at canceled invoices and unopened boxes stacked in the corner of my apartment. People kept asking why the ceremony was suddenly off, but I didn't have the strength to explain the truth, not yet. All I knew was that everything collapsed after one phone call from Emily, a call filled with trembling breaths and tears that sounded so real I never once questioned them. I remember standing there, holding my phone, feeling the ground shift without understanding why. And that was the moment my life split in two. The version where I thought I was marrying the woman I loved, and the version where I slowly uncovered just how deep her deception really ran. 3 days before we were supposed to finalize the last arrangements for the wedding, my phone rang late at night. Emily's name lit up the screen, and before I even said hello, I could already hear her sobbing. Not the kind of soft, shaken crying you sometimes hear when someone is overwhelmed, but frantic, panicked, almost breathless as if she'd been running. She said her mother, Linda, had just been diagnosed with something serious, something she couldn't even fully pronounce through her tears. She told me they were at the hospital, that everything was happening so fast, and that she didn't know what to do except call me. I remember trying to calm her down, asking what the doctors had said, asking if she needed me to come, but she just kept repeating, "We can't have the wedding right now. We can't. My mom needs me." There was no hesitation in me, not even a flicker of doubt. I told her of course we could postpone, of course I understood, and that nothing mattered more than her family. There was a long pause on the phone, like she was trying to catch her breath, and then she whispered a soft "thank you," as if I had just saved her from drowning. I stayed awake the entire night, checking my phone constantly, waiting for updates. But no messages came. The next morning, I texted her, asking if her mother was stable, asking if the doctors had said anything more concrete. Her reply was short, almost mechanical. "She's very weak, I'm exhausted." I told myself she was overwhelmed. I told myself she was scared. I told myself that people respond differently to stress, and it wasn't my place to question the way she was coping. But as the hours passed, the pattern repeated. Messages became shorter. Phone calls went unanswered. Whenever she did respond, it was always the same vague lines. "Still at the hospital, no improvement, can't talk right now." Meanwhile, the wedding vendors needed answers. Deposits were already placed, timelines were locked in, and people were expecting us to confirm everything before the weekend. I started making the calls myself, canceling, postponing, negotiating fees, all while trying to hide the sense of dread crawling up my spine. Every time someone asked, "Is everything okay with the bride's family?" I forced myself to say yes, even though nothing felt right. The silence from Emily didn't feel like the silence of someone caring for a sick parent. It felt like distance, like she was slipping out of reach and leaving me with nothing but unanswered questions. Still, I pushed through it, convincing myself that stress could make anyone act strangely. That love meant patience. That soon she would finally call and explain everything clearly, and I'd feel foolish for doubting her even for a moment. But that moment never came. Instead, I was left with fragments, half answers, disappearing conversations, and a growing feeling that something underneath her story was beginning to crack. It all started with a random message from my friend Mark. He sent me a photo with no context, just a simple "Dude, isn't this Emily's mom?" followed by a laughing emoji. I opened the picture, expecting something harmless, maybe an old family photo or a meme. But what stared back at me was Linda, perfectly healthy, perfectly radiant, standing under the bright lights of the Casino de Monte Carlo in Monaco. She wasn't in a hospital gown. She wasn't hooked up to any machine. She wasn't pale or weak or recovering from anything. She was wearing a sparkling gold dress, holding a glass of champagne, smiling like someone who hadn't had a single worry in the world for months. My heart dropped, and for a moment I genuinely couldn't breathe. I zoomed into the picture, thinking maybe it was old, maybe it was from years ago. But right there, clear as day, was the time stamp in the corner of the original photo Mark had taken from a mutual friend's story, posted only 20 minutes earlier. I felt electricity shoot through my body, the kind that comes when your brain realizes you've been played and is trying to warn you before your emotions catch up. I clicked into Linda's Instagram profile, something I hadn't done in weeks. Her stories were filled with little dots, more than 30 of them, all from the last 24 hours. I tapped through them one by one. A first-class cabin seat with champagne and caviar. A luxury spa robe, captioned, "Self-care never looked this good." A clip of her walking along a yacht deck, laughing as the wind blew her hair back. Then a picture of her at a Michelin star restaurant with the caption, "Monaco nights are unmatched." Not a single sign of illness. Not a single hospital wristband. Not even a hint of fatigue. Just lavish spending and carefree fun. My mind raced, trying to make it make sense. Maybe Emily didn't know. Maybe Linda had hidden the trip from her too. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt impossible. No one who is supposedly critically ill flies across the world for a luxury vacation without their daughter noticing. The pieces didn't fit. The longer I stared at those photos, the heavier the dread became, as if the truth was rising out of the ground and I couldn't shove it back down. I scrolled further and found posts from the past few days, pictures that had been there the whole time, while Emily was telling me her mother couldn't even speak. There she was, sitting on a balcony overlooking the Mediterranean, her skin glowing from the sun, cocktail in hand, no trace of the tragedy I'd been led to believe. My shock slowly transformed into something sharper. A slow spreading anger. Not because the lie itself was outrageous, but because of the ease with which she had told it. The confidence that I would never check, never question, never look closely enough to see the truth. For the first time since the phone call, I allowed myself to admit what I had been resisting. Emily wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't hiding because she was taking care of her sick mother. She was hiding because she didn't want me to see what was really going on. And deep down, I knew this discovery was only the beginning. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. The evidence was too clear, too damning, and the longer I stayed silent, the more I felt like I was letting a lie grow unchecked. I spent hours compiling everything, screenshots of Instagram stories, timestamps, photos from Mark, even the captions Emily had shared in the past that contradicted her recent claims. Once I had it all organized, I made a decision I knew would change everything. I sent the entire collection to the family group chat, the one with both our families and close friends. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Messages started flooding in from all directions. My own parents were stunned, but mostly just silent, unsure how to react. Emily's father exploded first, his words sharp and accusatory. "This is unacceptable. She lied about something serious for money and convenience." Her siblings were in shock, scrolling back through old messages and piecing together patterns they had never noticed before. It became clear that this wasn't the first time Linda had fabricated illness or financial crises to manipulate those around her. Emily's mother, who had always appeared charming and caring, suddenly looked calculated and self-serving in the eyes of everyone reading. And then Emily herself appeared in the chat. Her first message was short, almost desperate. "Please, don't do this in the group. This isn't how you handle it." I didn't respond immediately. Her second message was more emotional. "I'm begging you, stop. You're embarrassing us. This isn't fair." I read them, feeling a strange mix of sadness and vindication. This wasn't about embarrassment. This was about truth. Emily arrived at my apartment that evening, tears streaming down her face, voice trembling with outrage and fear. She tried to cry, tried to explain, tried to twist the narrative. "I didn't know what to do. You're making this worse. You don't understand the pressure I was under." I listened for a moment, then stopped her. "I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you and your mother lied. I understand that you used me, and I understand that the wedding isn't happening." Her sobs escalated into accusations. "You're ruining our family. You're tearing everyone apart." But the damage had already been done. The truth was out, and there was no way to put it back. Emily's father demanded explanations from her mother. Her siblings confronted her about years of manipulation. Even distant relatives began to question everything they thought they knew about the family. I stayed quiet, letting them face the consequences of their own deception. And in that silence, I realized something. I was no longer trapped by Emily's lies. I had exposed the truth. I had taken control. And for the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of relief amidst the chaos. It wasn't victory. It wasn't celebration. It was clarity. Finally, everyone could see what had been hidden for so long. And the world that Emily and her mother had tried to construct so carefully was collapsing. One message, one photo, one undeniable truth at a time. After the truth was exposed, Emily's reaction revealed more than I could have imagined. She sat across from me, trembling, eyes wide, as if she were waiting for me to yell, to curse, or to throw something. Instead, I just looked at her. Her voice broke as she admitted, almost reluctantly, that her mother had lied. "It was that serious," she said. She said it was just a psychological thing to cope. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. I leaned back, letting the weight of her words sink in. A psychological thing. So months of deception, endless lies, and financial manipulation were now just a form of therapy. I felt a mix of disbelief and anger. Then she turned the blame onto me, her voice rising. "You're obsessed with this wedding, with the money it costs. You only care about the spectacle, not about me or my family." I couldn't help but feel my jaw tighten. Every extravagant request, every detail she had demanded, every luxury I had agreed to, she wanted to paint all of that as my fault. But I remembered every conversation, every text, every plan. It was always her idea. It was always her insisting on how it should be. Her excuses and reversals didn't change that. I took a deep breath and said the words I had been holding back. "The wedding is canceled. Permanently, I am done." Her face contorted, shock and fury mixing with tears. "You can't just do this," she shouted. "I won't let you ruin everything." I stood firm, calm despite the storm raging in the room. "I've already seen enough lies to last a lifetime. I can't trust you anymore. I can't marry someone who has been living in deception this whole time." For a moment, she seemed to search for words, any words that could reverse the decision. But there were none. Her mother, who had once controlled so much of the narrative, was now silent, caught in the collapse of her carefully crafted illusion. Emily's siblings looked on, stunned, unable to intervene. The family dynamic, always fragile beneath the surface, began to crumble in real time. Her father, still reeling from the betrayal, demanded explanations and accountability from everyone, while her mother had no choice but to sit in shame. Emily, cornered, continued to weep, alternately blaming herself, her mother, and even me. But I had made my choice. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unknow what I had known. The lies had stretched too far, the manipulation too deep, and the trust was gone forever. As I walked away from the confrontation, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and liberation. Sorrow for the love that could not survive the truth. Liberation for finally freeing myself from the chains of deception. The wedding was no more. The family's illusions had shattered. And I realized that some endings are necessary, no matter how painful, to protect yourself from a lifetime of lies. I left the room knowing one thing clearly: there would be no going back. I thought the confrontation would be the end of it, that exposing the truth would finally close the chapter. I was wrong. Within days, Emily and her mother began a campaign that I could never have anticipated. It started with phone calls. Emily called my mother, claiming I was emotionally abusive and had ruined her daughter's life. Her mother joined in, spreading similar stories to distant relatives and mutual friends. Then came the messages on social media, posts accusing me of being controlling, selfish, and manipulative. They painted me as the villain, the one who destroyed a family and humiliated a young woman in front of everyone. Emily didn't stop there. She reached out to the vendors, threatening legal action and demanding refunds that were not owed. Some suppliers hesitated, worried about the storm of accusations she promised. Her mother, meanwhile, sent messages to old family friends and acquaintances, alleging fraud and mistreatment. It felt like the walls of my life were closing in. But I refused to respond with anger or panic. I collected every message, every recording, every piece of evidence of their harassment. Then came a recording from the wedding venue itself. Emily had called, yelling, screaming, and berating the staff for not bending to her demands. The anger in her voice was unmistakable, full of entitlement and manipulation. I listened to it carefully, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief. This was the proof I needed. I used it to counter every claim she had made, sending it to the vendors and the relevant parties. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Those who had been uncertain about the situation started to see the reality of her behavior. The threats lost their power. The vendors returned deposits and apologized for the confusion. Emily's social media attacks began to falter when friends and colleagues started asking for context. I stayed patient, letting her actions speak louder than any argument I could make. The harassment escalated for a short time, but without a solid foundation, it began to crumble. Each attempt to manipulate others backfired, and she found herself increasingly isolated. Even her own family began to question her decisions and the stories she was telling. Her father and siblings withdrew from the chaos, refusing to support further lies. Through all of this, I remained focused on one thing: protecting myself and reclaiming what was rightfully mine. By documenting everything and responding calmly, I was able to regain control of the narrative. What started as a relentless onslaught of accusations and manipulation ended with them exposed. The vendors, friends, and extended family could see who was telling the truth. And finally, the storm began to settle. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, and at times felt impossible. But in the end, Emily and her mother had underestimated me. Their attempts to control, manipulate, and intimidate had failed. I emerged from the ordeal stronger, more cautious, and more aware of how easily lies could spread if left unchecked. The chapter was not just closed, it had been rewritten entirely, with the truth finally on my side. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, the final layer of the deception came to light. It started with a tip from one of my coworkers who noticed unusual activity on social media, an account spreading false stories about me that didn't make sense. I traced it back to Emily, who had created a fake profile to attack my character online. It was petty, vindictive, and astonishingly elaborate. But the deeper I dug, the more I discovered. Emily wasn't just trying to smear me. She had an agenda I hadn't anticipated. She was reaching out to my ex-girlfriend, trying to stir conflict and manipulate the narrative to her advantage. I stayed calm and documented everything. Through a carefully planned interaction, she ended up revealing more than she intended. She admitted that her mother had never been sick. The luxurious trip to Monaco had been a getaway with her former boyfriend, Dimitri, not a vacation to recover or relax. Her plan had been clear all along. She had wanted to postpone the wedding to reconsider being with Dimitri, while keeping me on standby as a safety net. Every lie, every tear, every excuse she had offered was calculated to maintain her freedom while keeping me invested. The betrayal hit hard, harder than anything I had experienced in the previous weeks. I realized that everything, the canceled wedding, the financial losses, the emotional turmoil, had been orchestrated not out of necessity, but out of manipulation. The evidence was undeniable. Screenshots, recorded messages, and timestamps lined up perfectly with the story she had inadvertently confessed. I shared the findings with those who needed to know, including mutual friends and family members who had been unsure of the truth. The reaction was explosive. People were shocked, furious, and some even horrified at the extent of the deceit. Emily's credibility crumbled entirely. Her mother, who had supported the lies, was also exposed as complicit in the scheme. For the first time, it felt like the scales were balancing. The full scope of their actions could no longer be denied. No amount of excuses, tears, or pleading could erase the facts. Her attempt to manipulate everyone had backfired completely. The people she had tried to sway now viewed her with skepticism and caution. I felt a strange mix of vindication and relief. Vindication, because the truth was finally known. Relief, because the uncertainty and stress that had consumed me for weeks were finally lifting. It was a long, exhausting journey, but the deception could no longer hold power over me. Emily's intentions, laid bare, revealed the stark reality. I had been kept as a placeholder while she explored other options. The manipulation, the lies, and the false narratives were all exposed. And in that exposure, I found clarity. I knew exactly who had betrayed me and why. I knew that moving forward meant cutting ties entirely and protecting myself from any further schemes. The final revelation closed the chapter on the deceit and opened the path for rebuilding my life on honesty, trust, and awareness. Emily apologized, but it was empty, more about saving face than genuine remorse. The court stepped in and issued a restraining order, preventing her from contacting me for 2 years. Her mother faced legal consequences for financial fraud, and their assets were frozen and reallocated. Emily's siblings, disillusioned by the lies, cut ties completely, leaving the family fractured and isolated. I recovered most of the money lost to canceled services and fees, finally putting the financial stress behind me. A few weeks later, I went on a much-needed vacation with Harmony, a colleague who had supported me through the chaos. Our bond deepened during the trip, and over time, we began dating. Looking back, I realized the ordeal had taught me a crucial lesson about trust and vigilance. Not every tear is genuine. Not every story can be taken at face value. It's essential to notice the warning signs and verify the truth before investing your heart and resources. I emerged stronger, wiser, and more cautious, understanding that some betrayals reveal the people you truly should protect yourself from. In the end, I reclaimed my life, my peace, and a chance to love again with someone who valued honesty and loyalty above all.